So welcome back, everyone, to 101 Questions of AI. I am here with you today, and Luca and I are going to talk about something a little bit more technical, and we're going to try and ground it for you. So we're going to talk about the concept of exploitation and exploration, the trade-off within AI. So Luca, can you define, please?
Yeah, it's a very generic problem, actually. And in every data-driven decision-making process, you're faced with this issue. Exploitation, let's say it's a very straightforward, approach, actually, because you have to take a decision, and the decision could be as simple as, taking the umbrella before going to work. And the approach is, as I mentioned, very straightforward, because if you have to if you have to take a decision, you have two options: either to go random or to use the data that you have to take that decision. In the case of the umbrella, I could look outside the window and say, well, from my window, it's not raining. And in the trip to my office, I think it's not going to rain, so I'm not going to take the umbrella, or vice versa. Okay, so you use the data that you have, you take a suboptimal decision, and that's it. In the exploration paradigm, actually, this is the reverse. So instead of assuming that you have enough data, or assuming that you are happy with a suboptimal decision-making process, what you do here is you wait. So instead of deciding, you wait and you collect more data. So the real dilemma is when you are connecting the two. So when you are introducing a feedback loop between the data gathering and the decision-making process. In a nutshell, if you get back to the simple example before, we could collect more data, or observe let's say the weather while we are traveling. Okay, and then decide what to do with the umbrella, or with other decisions that we have to relate to that observation, which is the weather. And this is much more complicated.
Okay, so as I understand it, you get the dilemma if you were to go out, right, and you bring the umbrella, and then let's say you're like on a journey and you're trying to weigh whether you should leave the umbrella somewhere or you should continue bringing it with you, right? So that's basically the dilemma, because you're trying to assess based on the information that you have and the time that you've traveled so far.
Absolutely. In the case of the exploration and exploitation trade-off scenario, the model is no longer a spectator, but becomes an actor, because the data that we collect will influence the decision that we take later down the line.
Okay, that's very clear. So how does that affect AI and machine learning? How do they intersect?
Well, it's the AI is a data game. The more data that you have, up to a certain point, the better is going to be your machine learning algorithm. And in the case of AI, let's take an example. For instance, let's say that I want to train a machine learning model for detect faces. Data can be collected before the training, and in this case, I will have faces that will be used to understand what a face look like, what is a skin pixel versus a non-skin pixel, and there is no feedback loop. So we use this detector on a camera with live data, and in this case, it's an exploitation scenario that we are describing, and a scenario where we only use the data that we have. A second, more interesting scenario would be an exploration scenario where essentially we detect faces live in our camera pointed in an airport, and then we use those faces to train a new machine learning model. So in this case, we might also use this new machine learning model after it is trained to detect more faces, and we create that virtuous loop, hopefully, that will improve the performance, because we have fresh data all the time at every iteration.
That's very interesting. I guess like an interesting use case would be to use it like at the airport, and depending on like which cities, if you've been tracking like the faces that's coming in within like 6 months to a year, maybe by the end of the year, you can kind of tell what type of people travel when, right? Who goes off for the summer, who goes off around winter. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah, it's also a bit creepy. So this is just
Yeah.
an example, but the idea is that by creating this a link between the exploration and the exploitation, you can improve the value and the performance of your model. Obviously, there are problems, and the problems are that the model needs to, it needs some, let's say, booting or startup time to train itself. So you introduce a delay if you're implementing this loop. And then the second problem is data drift. So you can really fall into a rabbit hole, and if you are following the wrong data, then the model will essentially get very specific for a specific kind of data information, and then it would actually decrease the performance. So this is it's a trade-off. So it needs to be handled with care.
Yeah, and probably moderated quite a bit, no? Especially in the beginning.
Yes.
All right, so that has been a very interesting conversation. We hope that the viewers have learned a lot. And if you have any questions that are like this, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll try our